We'll need this rope.
I can help.
Your arm needs tending.
Later. Let's go.
They had
We'll
tied
need
her
this
to the
rope.
wagon wheel as if
I
she
can
were
help.
cargo.
Your arm
Rope
needs
biting
tending.
into her
Later.
wrists,
Let's
dust
go.
caked in her hair, the sun burning down like a judge that had already passed sentence. And when the last of the men rode off laughing, she was left alone on the empty stretch of prairie with only the creak of wood and the sound of her own breathing to remind her she was still alive, and she would have stayed there until night, claimed her if a single rider hadn't appeared through the heat haze. A cowboy worn thin by years of hard choices and harder losses, who reined in his horse the moment he saw her and said nothing at first, because anger, like that, didn't need words, only action. And when he dismounted and cut the rope with one clean motion, she collapsed forward, shaking. Certain freedom always came with another price. But instead he draped his coat around her shoulders and said quietly, "Easy now," the kind of voice that didn't rush and didn't lie. And when she looked up at him, eyes full of fear and defiance both, he added, "You're safe," though safety was a word she had learned not to trust. And as he helped her stand, she whispered that those men would come back, that they always did, and that she didn't belong to anyone anymore because she had paid enough for that lie. And the cowboy met her gaze and said the words that would follow her for the rest of her life. "Now you're mine," not as a threat, not as a claim of ownership, but as a vow, the kind made by men who had lost too much to ever abandon. Another soul to the dirt again. And he explained that where he came from, those words meant protection, meant standing between harm and the helpless, meant choosing responsibility when the world chose cruelty. And as they rode away together with her seated behind him, hands gripping his jacket because the ground still felt unsteady, she learned his name was Caleb, a rancher who had buried a wife and a child and sworn he would never ride past suffering again. And over the miles she told him her story in broken pieces, how her uncle had sold her debt to men who treated her like leverage, how every escape ended in punishment, how hope had become dangerous. And Caleb listened without interrupting, because some truths needed space to breathe. And when night fell, he built a fire and stood guard while she slept for the first time without rope or fear. And in the days that followed, he taught her the land again, how to saddle a horse, how to read the sky, how to trust small kindnesses before big promises. And when the men finally came looking, they found a ranch, fortified by resolve, and a woman, standing beside a man who refused to step aside. And no shots were fired because sometimes certainty was louder than guns. And when the dust settled, she realized that being his didn't mean losing herself. It meant being chosen when no one else had chosen her before. And years later, when travelers asked how a broken woman and a silent cowboy built a place known for mercy instead of fear, she would smile and say it started the day someone cut her free and meant it. And if this story moved you, if you believe courage still matters and kindness can rewrite fate, then don't forget to morning came slow on the prairie, pale light crawling over the hills and settling on the small ranch like a promise still unsure of itself. And she woke with a start, half expecting rope burns and laughter, only to find a wool blanket, the smell of coffee, and Caleb sitting a short distance away, cleaning his rifle with the calm focus of a man who prepared not for violence but for inevitability. And for a moment she simply watched him, realizing this was the first dawn she'd seen in years, without fear dictating her breath, yet fear still lingered like a shadow that didn't trust the sun. And when he noticed she was awake, he nodded once and said breakfast would be ready soon. No questions, no demands, which unsettled her more than cruelty ever had, because kindness required her to choose whether to stay. And as they ate in silence, she asked him why he hadn't asked her name. And he replied that names carried power and she deserved to offer hers freely, not because she was rescued, but because she was ready. And that answer stayed with her as they spent the day repairing fences, her hands trembling at first as if punishment would follow every mistake. Yet Caleb corrected her gently, never raising his voice, never stepping too close unless invited. And by afternoon, when dust rose on the horizon, her body stiffened before her mind caught up, memories screaming warning. But Caleb merely handed her a rifle and said he trusted her judgment, a simple sentence that felt heavier than chains breaking. And when the riders appeared, 3 of them, slow and confident, the kind of men who believed the world owed them obedience, her heart pounded so loud she feared it would give her away. Yet she stood her ground as Caleb stepped forward, calm as stone, telling them this land was claimed and so was the woman beside him, not as property but as protected. And the men laughed until they saw her eyes, no longer lowered, no longer begging, and something shifted, because predators sensed when prey had learned to stand, and they rode off with threats instead of action, leaving behind silence and a realization that fear lost power when faced. And that night, as stars spread across the sky like scattered embers, she finally told him her name. Voice steady though her hands shook, and he repeated it once, carefully as if it mattered, because to him it did, and she understood then that "now you're mine" had never meant possession. It meant partnership in survival, meant someone choosing to stay even when staying was dangerous. And as weeks passed, the ranch changed, laughter returning in small pieces, scars fading though never forgotten, and she learned to ride at his side instead of behind him. Learned that trust was not blind faith, but earned ground, step by step. And if this chapter of strength, healing, and quiet courage speaks to you, remember to by the time autumn settled over the prairie, the ranch no longer felt like a refuge borrowed from fear, but a place claimed by choice, and she moved through the days with a steadiness that surprised even herself. Mending tack, riding fence, and waking each morning with purpose instead of dread. Yet healing had a way of stirring old ghosts when least expected, and they came for her the night the wind howled like a warning, hooves pounding hard and reckless as torches flared against the dark, bringing back the men who believed time had weakened her, and for a heartbeat she froze, the memory of rope and dust clawing at her chest, until Caleb stepped beside her without a word, placing himself where he always had, between danger and her fear. And in that moment she realized she no longer needed to be told she was his, because she had already chosen to stand with him. And as the confrontation unfolded, it was not gunfire but resolve that ended it, her voice cutting through the shouting as she named her past aloud and refused it. And the men, faced with a woman no longer silent and a cowboy unyielding in his vow, rode away defeated not by force but by the loss of control they once held. And when the dust finally settled, she felt something inside her break free completely, a last chain snapping, and she thanked Caleb not for saving her life but for trusting her to reclaim it. And he answered that he had never owned her courage, only believed in it. And as dawn broke over the land they now shared as equals, she understood that being mine had transformed into being together, a partnership forged in survival and sealed by choice. And if this journey of strength, redemption, and quiet bravery moved you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because every story you support keeps hope alive for those still waiting to be cut free.